What if the Garden of Eden was real? Not a metaphor, not a myth, a real place that actually existed. What if Adam and Eve were real people, and the serpent, and the forbidden fruit, and the fall that changed everything? But what if none of it happened the way you were taught? What if the story in Genesis is a corrupted fragment of something far older and far more extraordinary? A memory so dangerous that it had to be buried, rewritten, turned into a fairy tale so that humanity would never discover what actually happened at the beginning of our species. I'm about to share with you what one man discovered when he found a crashed vessel in the mountains of Montana, and what the dying being inside showed him about the real Garden of Eden, the real Adam and Eve, the real meaning of the fall. This is not a story about sin. It's not about punishment. It's about something that was taken from humanity, something we were never supposed to forget, and something that connects directly to what Jesus came to restore. But I have to warn you, what you're about to hear will challenge everything you believe about human origins, about why we're here, about what we lost, and about what we can still reclaim. If you've ever sensed that the Genesis story was incomplete, if you've ever felt that humanity is capable of far more than we demonstrate, if you've ever wondered why we seem like fallen gods, struggling to remember who we are, this story will finally answer those questions. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because stories like this reveal the origins that have been hidden from us since the beginning, and this particular origin story is the key to understanding everything that came after. Now let me tell you how it all began for Daniel Ashford on an autumn morning in the Montana wilderness, when a trail of smoke led him to something that would rewrite everything he thought he knew about the birth of humanity. Daniel Ashford was 56 years old, former pastor, current nobody. 22 years he had led a congregation in Billings, 22 years of sermons, baptisms, weddings, funerals, 22 years of telling people what to believe about God, about salvation, about the meaning of existence. Then his son died, and everything collapsed. Michael was 24, healthy, happy, about to get married. Then a drunk driver ran a red light, and Daniel got the call that no parent should ever receive. He tried to keep going, stood at the pulpit the Sunday after the funeral, opened his mouth to preach about God's plan, about everything happening for a reason. Nothing came out. He stood there, silent, looking at faces that expected comfort, expected wisdom, expected him to make sense of something that made no sense. He couldn't do it. Daniel walked out of the church that day, never went back. The congregation was patient at first, then confused, then angry. 22 years of service, and he abandoned them when things got hard. That's how they saw it. They didn't understand. How could they? Daniel had spent his entire adult life teaching that God was loving, that God was just, that God had a plan. And then God's plan killed his son, a good kid, an innocent kid, sober, obeying traffic laws, destroyed by someone else's choices. Where was the justice in that? Where was the love? But Daniel moved to Montana, bought a small cabin in the mountains, told himself he needed time to heal, time to find his faith again. That was 4 years ago. He hadn't found anything, just silence, just empty mountains and emptier days. His wife Margaret had stayed in Billings. They weren't divorced, not officially, but they weren't together either. She had kept her faith, kept believing that Michael was in a better place, that she would see him again. Daniel couldn't pretend anymore, and Margaret couldn't live with someone who had given up on God. So here he was, 56 years old, alone in a cabin, no congregation, no family, no faith. He spent his days hiking, chopping wood, reading books that had nothing to do with theology, anything to fill the hours until he could sleep, anything to avoid the questions that had no answers. Sometimes he talked to Michael, out loud in the empty cabin, knowing no one could hear. "I don't know if you're anywhere, son. I don't know if anything is anywhere, but if you can hear me, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I taught you things I'm not sure are true. I'm sorry I don't have any answers." No response, ever. Just wind through pine trees and the sound of his own breathing. Daniel had stopped praying 2 years ago. What was the point? If God existed, he wasn't listening, and if he didn't exist, then Daniel had wasted his entire life on a beautiful lie. Either way, prayer felt hollow. But lately, something strange had been happening. Dreams. vivid dreams that felt more real than waking life. He would find himself in a garden, not a normal garden, something vast, something luminous, trees that glowed from within, fruit that pulsed with colors he had no names for, a river that sang as it flowed, and he wasn't alone in the garden. There were others, figures made of light, moving through the trees, speaking in a language that was not language, that was pure meaning flowing directly into his mind. He would wake from these dreams with tears on his face, not sadness, something else, longing, homesickness for a place he had never been, at least not in this life. Daniel told himself it was grief, his subconscious processing loss, creating fantasies of paradise because reality was too painful. But the dreams kept coming, night after night, and each time he remembered more. There was something important in that garden, something he was supposed to understand, something that had been forgotten. He started sketching what he saw, crude drawings. He had never been an artist, but he needed to capture it somehow. The trees, the light, the figures. He filled 3 notebooks, then hid them in a drawer, embarrassed by his own obsession. A former pastor drawing pictures of imaginary gardens. Pathetic. On the morning of October 17th, Daniel woke before dawn. Another dream, another glimpse of the garden, another ache in his chest that wouldn't fade. He made coffee, sat on his porch, watched the sun rise over the mountains, and then he saw the smoke, a thin trail rising from somewhere in the valley, 3, maybe 4 miles away, in an area with no roads, no cabins, no reason for smoke to exist. Forest fire? No. Too concentrated, too vertical, like something was burning in a single spot. Daniel's first thought was hikers, someone in trouble. He had found lost hikers before. Part of living in the wilderness was accepting responsibility for anyone who wandered in unprepared. He grabbed his pack, first aid kit, water, emergency supplies, the things he always carried. He hiked toward the smoke, through dense pine forest, over rocky ridges, following the thin gray trail against the blue morning sky. It took 2 hours to reach the source, and when he did, Daniel Ashford stopped believing that his dreams were just dreams. Because there, in a clearing, surrounded by scorched earth and shattered trees, was something that should not exist. A vessel. Metallic. Curved, about the size of a small car. Half buried in the ground from impact, smoke rising from cracks in its surface. And something was moving inside. Daniel stood at the edge of the clearing, pack on his shoulders, heart pounding in his chest. 22 years of preaching about angels and demons, about heaven and hell, about the seen and unseen realms. He had never actually expected to encounter any of it. Now, something from beyond this world was 50 feet away, wounded, trapped, waiting, and everything Daniel thought he knew about Genesis, about Eden, about the beginning of humanity, was about to be revealed as a shadow of the truth. Daniel didn't move for a long time. He stood at the tree line, staring at the impossible thing in the clearing, trying to make his brain accept what his eyes were seeing. The vessel was unlike anything human hands had made. No seams, no rivets, no visible propulsion system, just smooth curves of metal that seemed to shift color slightly as he watched. Silver, then blue, then something in between. Smoke curled from a gash along one side. The smell was wrong, not burning fuel or melting plastic. Something else, something that made his sinuses ache. Move, he told himself. Do something, help or run. But do something. His legs wouldn't obey. 22 years of preaching about the supernatural, about miracles, about beings from other realms. He had believed it. At least, he thought he had believed it. Now he realized belief was easy when it stayed abstract, when it lived in books and sermons and comfortable Sunday mornings. This was different. This was real, and real was terrifying. The movement inside the vessel came again. A shifting, a sound like metal scraping against metal. Something was alive in there. Something was trying to get out. Daniel's hand went to the knife on his belt. Stupid. What was a 4-inch blade going to do against something that traveled in vessels from the sky? But the weight of it comforted him, gave him something to hold on to. He took a step forward, then another. "Hello?" His voice came out cracked, weak. "Is someone there? Do you need help?" Silence. The smoke continued to rise. The shifting sound stopped. Daniel moved closer. 20 feet from the vessel now, he could see more details. The surface wasn't just smooth, it had patterns, symbols maybe, or circuits, something embedded in the metal itself. And then he saw the opening. A section of the hull had buckled inward from impact, cracked. Through the gap, he could see darkness inside, and something else. A hand, slender, long fingers, grayish skin, reaching through the crack. Weakly, barely moving, Daniel's fear screamed at him to run, but something else overrode it. 22 years of standing at hospital beds, holding the hands of the dying, comforting the sick. Whatever was in that vessel, it was hurt, it was trapped, it needed help. He was a lot of things now, lost, broken, faithless. But he wasn't the kind of man who walked away from suffering. Daniel approached the opening, knelt beside the cracked hull. The hand was still there, still reaching. "I'm here," he said. "I'm going to try to help you. Can you understand me?" The hand moved, fingers curling slightly, acknowledging. Daniel examined the crack, too narrow for a person to fit through, but the metal was damaged, weakened. Maybe he could widen it. He pulled tools from his pack, a small pry bar. Not much, but something. "I'm going to try to open this more. Hold on." He worked the pry bar into the gap, pushed. The metal groaned but didn't give. He pushed harder, threw his weight into it, felt the vessel shift slightly beneath him. Then something happened. The metal around the crack began to glow, faint blue light tracing the edges, and slowly, smoothly, the gap widened on its own. Daniel stumbled back, watched as the vessel opened itself, the damaged section pulling apart like a wound being dressed, and there, inside, was the being. Daniel's breath stopped. It was humanoid, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but wrong. Everything slightly wrong. The skin was pale gray, almost luminous. The body was thin, fragile looking. The head was larger than a human's, smooth, no hair, no ears that he could see, and the eyes, large, dark, deep as space itself, reflecting the morning light like pools of black water. The being was injured. Daniel could see that immediately. Something dark leaked from a wound on its side. Not blood, something else. And the way it lay, the weakness in its movements, spoke of serious damage. It looked at him, those impossible eyes fixed on his face, and then Daniel heard a voice, not with his ears, inside his head, clear, calm, ancient. "Do not be afraid, Daniel Ashford. I have been waiting for you." Daniel jerked backward. His hand flew to his temple. "How? What? You're in my head." "This is how my kind communicates. I apologize for the intrusion. I have no other way to speak with you." "How do you know my name?" "I have been observing you for some time. Your dreams of the garden, your drawings, your questions about what was lost at the beginning, you have been calling out without knowing it. And I have heard." Daniel's heart hammered. The garden dreams, the notebooks hidden in his drawer, things he had never told anyone. That's not possible. Those were just dreams, my brain processing grief. They were not just dreams, they were memories. Awakening after millennia of sleep. You have been remembering, Daniel. Remembering things your conscious mind was never taught. Things that were erased from human knowledge long ago. Daniel shook his head. Denial, fighting with something deeper. Something that recognized the truth in the being's words. "What are you? Where do you come from?" "I am a keeper of origins, a guardian of the true history. I come from far beyond your world, but I have been connected to your species since the beginning, since the garden you dream of was real." "The garden was real?" "More real than anything in your current existence. And what happened there, what was done to your species, is the reason for everything that followed. Every religion, every myth, every confused memory of paradise lost, all fragments of the same truth." Daniel looked at the wounded being, at the crashed vessel, at the impossible situation he found himself in. "You're dying, aren't you?" "This body is damaged beyond repair. I do not have much time. That is why I called you here. That is why I sent the dreams, because the truth must be passed on, and you are ready to receive it." "Why me? I'm nobody. A broken man who lost his faith." "Because you lost your faith, you can receive new understanding. Those who cling to what they believe cannot accept what is real. Your emptiness has made you ready. Your suffering has opened you. Daniel thought about Michael, about the church, about 4 years of hollow days and vivid dreams, all preparation, all leading here. If I listen, he said slowly, if you show me whatever truth you're talking about, what happens then? Then you carry it forward. You become what I have been, a keeper, a guardian, one who remembers when others forget. Daniel looked at the being, at the light fading slowly in those dark eyes, at the wound that was clearly fatal. He had come to the mountains to escape, to hide, to wait for death in his own slow way. And now, death had found him, not his own, but a death that was asking him to receive something, to become something. He thought about what he had lost, his son, his faith, his purpose. Maybe this was why. Show me, Daniel said. Show me the real Garden of Eden. The being's hand rose slowly, trembling with effort, reached toward Daniel's forehead. Close your eyes. What you are about to see is the memory of your species, buried for millennia, preserved for this moment. Daniel closed his eyes, felt the cool touch of alien fingers against his skin, and then he was somewhere else entirely, somewhere ancient, somewhere beautiful, somewhere that his soul recognized as home. The garden was real, not a metaphor, not a symbol, a place, vast, alive, more vivid than anything Daniel had ever experienced in his physical body. Colors he had no names for, trees that stretched toward a sky that wasn't quite a sky, light that came from everywhere and nowhere, a river that flowed through the center, singing as it moved, actually singing, music in the water itself. Daniel stood in the garden, not as an observer, as a presence. He could feel the grass beneath feet he didn't have, smell fragrances that made his soul ache with recognition. I have been here before, he realized. Not in dreams. Before. Before I was Daniel, before I was human. Yes. The being's voice came from within him now. Every human soul passed through this place, before taking physical form. This is where you came from. This is what you forgot. Daniel walked through the garden, or moved. Movement worked differently here. Intention became action without effort. He saw others. Beings of light moving among the trees, some humanoid, others shapes he couldn't describe, all radiating the same quality, awareness, love, peace. What is this place? Daniel asked. Heaven? Not heaven as your religions describe it. This is a dimension, a frequency of existence, what you might call the original template, the place where consciousness exists before it becomes matter, before it takes form in physical reality. Daniel watched the light beings interact. No conflict, no fear, just harmony, connection, unity. And humans came from here. All consciousness came from here, but humans are special. Your species was designed for a specific purpose, and this garden is where that purpose began. The vision shifted. Daniel found himself in a different part of the garden, a clearing surrounded by trees that glowed with inner light. And in the clearing, 2 figures, not the Adam and Eve of paintings, not primitive humans in fig leaves. These were beings of light, radiant, powerful, more beautiful than anything Daniel could have imagined. They moved through the garden with perfect grace, perfect awareness, connected to everything around them. That's them? Daniel whispered. Adam and Eve? Those are the names your scriptures gave them. They were the first, the prototype, consciousness that chose to descend further into matter than any had before, to become fully physical while retaining full awareness. Daniel watched the 2 beings. They weren't walking, they were dancing, with each other, with the garden, with existence itself. Joy radiated from them like light from a star. They were like gods. They were what humans were meant to be, physical bodies with full access to their divine nature, able to create, to heal, to communicate directly with Source, to move between dimensions at will. The physical world was their playground, and they were meant to seed it with consciousness, to help matter remember what it truly was. What happened? How did we go from that to this? The vision shifted again, darker now. A shadow had entered the garden. Daniel saw a figure approaching the 2 radiant beings, not a serpent. Something else, another being of light, but different. The light was colder somehow, sharper. Who is that? One of us, one of the keepers, but one who disagreed with the experiment. Experiment? Humanity was not an accident, Daniel. Your species was designed, created by consciousness itself as a way to experience physical reality without losing connection to source, a bridge between spirit and matter. Other keepers and I supported this creation, but some believed it was dangerous, believed that consciousness should not descend so far into density, believed that the experiment would fail. Daniel watched the cold figure approach Adam and Eve, watched it speak to them, watched something change in their posture, their light. The serpent, that's what Genesis is describing. A distortion of the truth. The one you call the serpent was not evil, was not trying to tempt them into sin. It was trying to protect them, in its own way, by its own reasoning. Protect them from what? From the risk of forgetting. You see, Daniel, the original design allowed Adam and Eve to be fully physical while retaining full awareness of what they truly were. They could eat, touch, feel, experience all the pleasures of matter, but they never forgot they were consciousness, never forgot their connection to source. The vision showed the two radiant beings in their glory, powerful, free, unlimited. The one you call the serpent believed this was unsustainable, believed that eventually consciousness that deep in matter would become trapped, would forget, would suffer. So it offered them a choice, the forbidden fruit. Not a fruit, a modification, a change to their consciousness structure. The serpent offered to limit their awareness, to create a veil between their physical minds and their divine nature. It believed this would protect them. If they couldn't remember how vast they truly were, they couldn't suffer the anguish of feeling trapped in density. Daniel watched the scene unfold, the cold figure presenting something to the two beings, a choice, an offer. They accepted. Eve accepted first, not out of weakness, out of compassion. She felt the serpent's fear, its genuine concern. She wanted to ease its worry, to show that she trusted its intentions, even if she didn't fully understand them. Daniel watched the female figure reach out, take something from the serpent, something that looked like light crystallized into form. And the moment she touched it, everything changed. Her radiance dimmed, not disappeared, dimmed. The full blazing light of her consciousness contracted, pulled inward, became smaller. And on her face, for the first time, Daniel saw confusion, fear, forgetting. Adam followed, not because he was tempted, because he loved her, because he wouldn't let her face the change alone. And then they both stood in the garden, still beautiful, still alive, but different. The full awareness was gone. The direct connection to source had been veiled. They looked at each other and for the first time didn't see the infinite consciousness behind the eyes. They saw only the physical form. They forgot what they were. Yes, the modification worked exactly as the serpent intended. They could no longer remember their true nature, could no longer access their full abilities. The veil had been placed. Daniel felt tears streaming down his face. The vision was so vivid, the loss so profound. That's the fall. That's what Genesis is really describing, not sin, not disobedience, forgetting. Yes, the fall was not a punishment from God. It was not a moral failure. It was a modification to consciousness that created separation, separation from source, separation from each other, separation from their own divine nature. The vision continued. Daniel watched Adam and Eve leave the garden, not cast out by an angry God, simply unable to perceive it anymore. The garden was still there, still real, but the veil made it invisible, inaccessible. They walked into a world that suddenly seemed hostile, cold, separate. They had to struggle to survive now, had to work, had to suffer, not because they were being punished, because they had forgotten the power they once wielded effortlessly. The whole history of humanity, Daniel said slowly, all the suffering, all the searching for God, all the religion, it's all because of this, because we forgot. Yes, every religion is an attempt to remember. Every spiritual practice is a method to thin the veil. Every mystic who has ever lived has been trying to restore what was lost in that moment. Daniel watched generations unfold, humans multiplying, spreading across the earth, building civilizations, creating religions, waging wars, searching, always searching, for something they couldn't name. And Jesus? Where does Jesus fit into this? The vision shifted. Brilliant light flooded Daniel's awareness. He saw Jesus, not as a painting, not as a religious icon, as a being, a consciousness. And this consciousness was different from the others. It was fully awake, fully aware, no veil, no forgetting, the same radiance that Adam and Eve had possessed before the fall, complete, undimmed. Jesus came to demonstrate that the veil could be removed, that humans could reclaim what was lost. He incarnated with full awareness intact to show that it was possible, to create a template, a pathway back. Daniel watched Jesus walk through Galilee, saw what he had never seen before, the light radiating from him, the way reality bent around his presence, the way sickness dissolved and matter rearranged itself in response to his consciousness. He was like Adam and Eve were supposed to be. Yes, Jesus was the second Adam, not symbolically, literally. He was consciousness operating in physical form without the veil, without the forgetting. He was proof that the modification could be reversed. Daniel watched Jesus teach, heard the familiar words with new understanding. The kingdom of heaven is within you, not somewhere else. Within. The garden had always been there. The connection to source had always been there. Only the veil made it seem distant. I and the Father are one, not special, not unique to Jesus. The truth of every human, the oneness that the veil had hidden. You must be born again. Not a religious conversion, a consciousness shift. The removal of the veil, the restoration of original awareness. He was trying to undo what the serpent did. Yes, his entire ministry was a demonstration of unveiled consciousness and an instruction manual for removing the veil. The healing showed what was possible when you remembered your true nature. The teachings explained how to remember. But they killed him, because unveiled consciousness threatens every power structure, every institution built on human forgetting. If people remember what they truly are, they don't need priests, don't need kings, don't need anyone to mediate between them and source. Jesus was a threat to everyone who benefited from human limitation. Daniel watched the crucifixion, felt the agony, but also felt what lay beneath it, a vast calm, an awareness that observed the body's suffering without being consumed by it. He was demonstrating again, even in death, showing that consciousness is not the body, that the true self cannot be destroyed, and then the resurrection. Daniel saw it clearly now, not a body reanimating, consciousness so developed that it could reconstruct physical form, the ultimate proof that the veil was an illusion, that death was an illusion, that everything humans feared was based on forgetting what they truly were. Why didn't it work? Daniel asked. If Jesus showed the way, why is humanity still veiled, still suffering, still forgetting? Because the institutions captured his message, turned liberation into doctrine, turned empowerment into dependency. Instead of teaching people to remove their own veils, they taught people to worship Jesus as the only one who could be unveiled. They replaced one limitation with another. The vision shifted. Daniel saw centuries of religious history, councils deciding which gospels to keep, which to destroy, mystics being silenced, teachers who came too close to the truth being branded as heretics. The veil remained because those in power benefited from it. Veiled humans are controllable. Unveiled humans are free, and freedom threatens control. Daniel felt anger rising, all those centuries, all those seekers, all those genuine hearts reaching for God, being handed watered-down truth that kept them asleep. Is that why you're here? To finally tell the truth? I am dying, Daniel. My physical form will cease within hours. I came because the time of unveiling has arrived. Humanity is ready to remember, and the truth needs voices. Why now? What's different about now? The vision expanded. Daniel saw Earth from above, saw points of light scattered across its surface, millions of them, flickering, growing brighter. Humans are awakening spontaneously all over your planet. The veil is thinning. Something is shifting in your collective consciousness. More humans are asking questions now than at any point in your history. More are sensing that the official stories are incomplete. The tipping point. Yes, when enough humans remember, the veil dissolves completely, not just for individuals, for the entire species. This has happened before on other worlds. Consciousness evolves past the need for forgetting, and everything changes. How many? How many need to remember? A fraction of your population, but a critical fraction, and they must remember deeply, not just intellectually, truly, the way you are remembering now. Daniel looked at the lights scattered across the earth, so many, and yet so few compared to the billions still sleeping. And the serpent? The one who created the veil? What happened to it? Still present, still believing it was right, still working to maintain the forgetting. Not out of evil, out of fear. It genuinely believes that unveiled humanity would destroy itself, that consciousness in physical form cannot handle the full truth. Was it wrong? About the risk? The being paused. We do not know. The experiment is still running. Humanity has not yet proven whether unveiled consciousness can thrive in physical form without descending into destruction. The serpent's fear may yet prove justified. That's what this is about. We're the experiment, and we haven't completed it yet. Yes, every human life is data, every choice between love and fear, between creation and destruction, between remembering and forgetting. You are all proving whether the original design can work, whether consciousness can go that deep into matter and still find its way back. Daniel absorbed this, the weight of it, the responsibility. What do I do? How do I help? You do what Jesus did. You live unveiled. You demonstrate what is possible. You tell the truth to those who are ready to hear it, not through force, not through argument, through being, through example. I'm nobody, a broken pastor who lost his faith. You lost your false faith, the faith built on incomplete understanding. Now you can build true faith, based on direct experience, based on what you have seen and felt and remembered. The vision began to fade, the garden dissolving around Daniel. Wait, I have more questions. I need to understand more. You will. The relic I carry, it will pass to you. It contains the full history, the complete record. You can access it whenever you need. Relic? What relic? In my vessel, a device that holds memory, the same technology that is showing you these visions. It will be yours, your tool for remembering and for helping others remember. Daniel felt himself being pulled back, away from the garden, away from the visions, back toward his physical body. One more thing, Daniel Ashford. Yes? Your son, Michael. Daniel's heart clenched. He is in the garden. He never had the veil. Children who die young often don't. He has been calling to you through your dreams. He is the reason you could hear me at all. He helped prepare you. Daniel couldn't speak. Tears flooded his awareness. He wants you to know he is not lost. He is more found than he ever was in physical form, and he will wait for you. However long it takes, he will be there when you return. The vision ended. Daniel opened his eyes. He was kneeling beside the crashed vessel, the being before him, those dark eyes fixed on his face, but the light in them was fading. The body was failing. I saw it, Daniel whispered. I saw everything, the garden, Adam and Eve, the serpent, Jesus. I understand now. Good. The voice was weaker now, fainter. Then you know what you must do. I don't know if I can. I'm not Jesus. I'm not even a good man. You are exactly what is needed, a human who forgot and then remembered. That is more powerful than one who never forgot, because you can show others that the path back exists, that it is possible for anyone. The being's hand moved, trembling, reached into the damaged vessel, drew out something, a crystal, small, fitting in the palm, glowing with soft inner light. This is the relic, the keeper of memory. It is yours now. Daniel took the crystal. It was warm, alive, pulsing gently against his skin. The moment he touched it, he felt the garden again, faint but present, accessible. What do I do with it? Hold it when you need to remember. Hold it when you need to show others. It will transmit what I have shown you. And more. There is so much more. You will spend the rest of your life exploring what it contains. The being's eyes began to close. Wait, please, I don't even know your name. Names are human constructs, but you may call me what the first keepers were called, Watcher, Guardian. We have watched your species since the beginning, hoped for you, feared for you, loved you across millennia. The light faded further. Tell them the truth, Daniel. Tell them Eden was real. Tell them the fall was not punishment. Tell them the veil can be removed. Tell them Jesus showed the way. Tell them they are not sinners crawling toward heaven. They are gods learning to remember. The eyes closed. The body went still. And Daniel Ashford knelt alone beside a crashed vessel in the Montana wilderness, holding a crystal that contained the true history of human existence. The being was gone, but the truth remained, and Daniel finally understood why he had lost everything. His son, his faith, his congregation, his life. It had all been preparation, clearing away the false so the true could take its place. He looked at the crystal in his hand, felt the garden pulsing within it. Michael was there, waiting, and billions of humans were walking around with veils over their eyes, forgetting what they truly were, suffering because of a modification made at the dawn of their species. Daniel had spent 4 years hiding in these mountains, waiting to die. Now he had a reason to live. He stood, placed the crystal carefully in his pack, took one last look at the vessel and the still form within. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I won't waste this, I promise." Then he turned and began the long hike back to his cabin. The sun was setting by the time he arrived, golden light spilling across the mountains. Daniel sat on his porch, held the crystal in his hands, felt the truth pulsing through him. The Garden of Eden was real. Humanity had fallen, not through sin, through forgetting. And the way back was open for anyone willing to remember. He had been a pastor once, had stood at pulpits and told people about a distant God who might save them if they believed the right things. Now he understood. God was not distant. God was within, had always been within. Only a veil made it seem otherwise, and the veil could be removed. That was the real gospel, the one that had been hidden, the one Jesus tried to teach before his message was captured. Daniel looked at the crystal. So much to learn, so much to share. He didn't know how, didn't know where to start, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was no longer hiding, no longer waiting to die. He was a keeper now, a guardian of truth, and the remembering had begun. The first week, Daniel didn't leave the cabin. He sat with the crystal, hours at a time, letting the memories flow through him. There was so much more than what the being had shown him, layers within layers, the complete history of human consciousness, the keepers who had watched, the teachers who had tried to help, the forces that had worked to maintain the forgetting. He filled notebook after notebook, not sketches this time, words, trying to capture what he was learning, knowing that words would never be enough, but words were what he had. Words were his tool. The second week he called Margaret. "Daniel, is everything okay? You never call." "I need to tell you something that happened." Silence on the line. Then, "You sound different. What's going on?" He told her, all of it. The crashed vessel, the being, the visions, the truth about Eden. He expected her to hang up, to think he had finally lost his mind completely. She didn't. "Daniel," she said quietly, "I've been having dreams about Michael, about a garden. I thought I was going crazy." "You're not crazy. He's there. He's really there, and he's waiting for us." Margaret wept. For the first time since Michael's death, she wept with something other than grief, with hope. "Can I come there?" she asked. "Can I see the crystal?" "Yes, please, come." She arrived 3 days later, stood in the cabin doorway, looking at the man she had married 30 years ago, the man she had watched crumble after Michael's death. He looked different now. The emptiness was gone. Something else had taken its place. "Show me," she said. Daniel placed the crystal in her hands. Margaret closed her eyes, and for the next hour, she didn't move, didn't speak, just experienced. When she opened her eyes, tears were streaming down her face. "I saw him. I saw Michael. He's so beautiful, Daniel. He's so at peace." "I know." And the garden, it's real. Everything we believed, everything we taught, it was so small compared to this. I know. They held each other. For the first time in 4 years, grieving together, remembering together, beginning again. Margaret stayed, not as a visitor, as a partner. The rift that Michael's death had created finally began to heal, not because the pain was gone, because they finally understood what the pain was for. 3 months after the encounter, Daniel started writing in earnest, not notes, a book, the true story of human origins, the real Garden of Eden, the fall that wasn't a sin, the return that was possible for anyone. He didn't know if anyone would read it, didn't know if anyone would believe it. That wasn't his responsibility. His responsibility was to tell the truth. What others did with it was their choice. 6 months after the encounter, Daniel received an email from a woman in California. I don't know how to explain this. I found your website. Read what you wrote about Eden, and something happened to me. I remembered things I couldn't possibly know. Is this real? Am I losing my mind? Daniel wrote back. Told her she wasn't losing her mind. Told her she was finding it. More emails followed. From people all over the world. Something was resonating. The truth had a frequency, the being had said, and people who were ready could hear it. 8 months after the encounter, Daniel did something he never thought he would do again. He stood at a pulpit, not his old church, a small gathering, 30 people in a community center in Bozeman, people who had read his writings, people who wanted to hear more. He looked out at their faces, saw the same hunger he had felt for 4 years, the same questions, the same yearning for something real. I was a pastor for 22 years, he began. I taught you that you were sinners, that you needed to be saved by someone outside yourself, that God was distant and you had to earn his love. He paused, felt the crystal warm in his pocket. I was wrong. Not because I was lying, because I didn't know. But now I know, and I'm going to tell you the truth. He told them about Eden, about the veil, about what humanity truly was. Some left, uncomfortable, threatened, clinging to the old stories, but most stayed, and in their eyes Daniel saw recognition, the same recognition he had felt in the garden. They were remembering. 1 year after the encounter, Daniel stood at Michael's grave, Margaret beside him, the crystal in his hand. I understand now, son, Daniel said, why you had to go, why it had to happen the way it did. You broke me open so I could receive this. You prepared me. Wind moved through the cemetery, the same wind that had blown through the garden in his visions, and Daniel felt Michael, not imagined, felt a presence, a warmth, a love that death couldn't touch. I'm going to finish what you started, Daniel said. I'm going to help them remember, as many as I can. And when this body is done, I'll come home, to the garden, to you. The presence intensified, just for a moment. Acknowledgement, approval, love. Then it softened, still there, always there, but gentle. Daniel looked at Margaret. She was smiling through her tears. He heard you, she said. I know. They walked back to the car, back to the life that was waiting, the work that needed to be done. Daniel had lost his son, lost his faith, lost his congregation, lost everything he thought mattered, and gained something infinitely greater. The truth about where humanity came from, the truth about what humanity could become, the truth about a garden that was still there, just beyond the veil, waiting for anyone willing to remember. He had been a pastor once, telling people about a God they couldn't see. Now he was a keeper, showing people the God that lived within them. The veil was thinning. Across the whole planet, more people waking up every day. And Daniel Ashford, former pastor, grieving father, keeper of the crystal, was going to spend whatever time he had left helping them see. The garden was real, the fall was reversible, and the way home was open for anyone willing to remember. Daniel Ashford spent 22 years teaching people they were sinners. He was wrong. You are not a sinner. You are not fallen. You are not broken. You are a divine consciousness wearing a temporary disguise. A God who forgot it was a God. A being of infinite light who agreed to experience limitation so you could have the adventure of finding your way back. The Garden of Eden was real. You were there. Before you took this body, before you forgot. You walked in that garden. You knew what you truly were, and then the veil was placed, not as punishment, not as condemnation, as part of an experiment that is still running, an experiment that you are helping to complete with every choice you make. The question is not whether you are worthy of returning to the garden. The question is whether you are willing to remember it never left you. It's still there, right now, on the other side of a veil that is thinner than you think. You feel it sometimes, in dreams, in moments of unexpected peace, in the ache you can't explain when you look at the stars. That ache is homesickness. For a place you've already been, for a truth you already know. Jesus came to show the way back, not to be worshipped, to be followed, to demonstrate that the veil could be removed, that any human could reclaim what was lost. The churches made him into a distant savior, but he was always meant to be a door you can walk through, anytime you choose. So I ask you now, have you felt the garden calling? Have you sensed that the story you were taught was incomplete? Have you known, somewhere deep, that you are far more than a sinner waiting for judgment? That knowing is not arrogance, it's memory, surfacing after millennia of sleep. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you remember. Tell me what you've always felt about Eden. Tell me about the moments when the veil thinned and you glimpsed what lay beyond. Because every voice that speaks the truth makes it easier for others to hear it. And if this story stirred something in you, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. There are more origins to uncover, more veils to lift, more truths that have been hidden since the beginning of our species. The garden is waiting, the way back is open, and the only thing standing between you and paradise is a veil made of forgetting. Are you ready to remember?